For 9 months, I existed as a ghost in Giordano Esposito's world. That's the truth of working in a fortress disguised as a villa overlooking the Bay of Naples. I'm Generosa Udinese, 26 years old, and I've perfected the art of being nowhere while cleaning everywhere. My hands polish marble surfaces that gleam under Murano glass chandeliers I could never afford to touch outside these walls. I fold linen softer than anything I've ever slept on. Arrange roses and orchids in vases worth more than 3 months of my salary, and move through rooms like air, present but unnoticed. The Esposito estate sprawls across volcanic hillsides, a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture concealing very modern secrets. Frescoed ceilings hide surveillance cameras. Marble floors, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, conceal weapon caches in hollow spaces beneath. The gardens where I sometimes take my lunch break, terraced levels of roses, jasmine, and ancient olive trees, grow over buried secrets I've learned not to think about. 3 levels above ground, 2 below. 37 rooms I clean on rotation. 11 balconies overlooking a bay so blue it hurts to look at directly. Giordano Esposito himself is a legend whispered in 3 languages across as many continents. Born in Palermo 34 years ago, raised in Moscow's brutal underworld, educated in violence across Tijuana's bloodiest decade. The stories say he survived his first assassination attempt at 15, killed his first man at 16, inherited his father's empire at 23 and doubled it within 5 years. Now he commands operations from Italy to Russia to Mexico, shipping routes, protection networks, political influence that makes government officials sweat during their morning espresso. I've seen him exactly 17 times in 9 months. I keep count because each sighting feels significant, even though I know I'm invisible to him. He moves with predatory grace through corridors I've just cleaned, expensive suits tailored to hide the shoulder holster I pretend not to notice, dark hair always perfectly styled, jaws sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the color of strong espresso that look through me rather than at me. He holds meetings in his study with men who speak in low voices and leave through side entrances I'm never supposed to use. I clean up after them, empty crystal ashtrays that smell of Cuban cigars, collect glasses still wet with grappa, straighten chairs where life and death decisions were made. I don't ask questions. That's not my job. My job is to disappear. The only constant in this carefully ordered existence is Katerina. My older sister works in the villa's kitchens, 31 years old with our mother's warm eyes and steady hands. She makes breakfasts that smell like home and dinners that look like art, feeds men who've killed for less than the cost of the truffles she shaves over their pasta. Every evening when our shifts end, we take the bus back to our tiny apartment in Bari's poorest district, the 1-bedroom space we share with her 8-year-old daughter Lucia. Thin walls, unreliable heating, neighbors whose arguments bleed through plaster at 3 a.m, but it's ours. Well, rented, barely afforded. I work the extra shifts whenever they're offered because I need every euro, because 63,000 euros in debt doesn't disappear on its own. Because our father's fishing boat business collapsed 3 years ago under the weight of protection payments to the Santoro family, payments that kept increasing until there was nothing left but debt and a small boat rotting in Bari's harbor. Papa signed papers he didn't understand, accepted interest rates that should be criminal. And now Katerina and I send money home every month to keep the collectors from taking the house where we grew up. So I clean, I fold, I polish, I accept overtime without complaint, and drink cheap coffee to stay awake through double shifts. Tuesday evening, the antique clock in the main hall chimes 7 times as I finish dusting the library's upper shelves. My shoulders ache from scrubbing bathroom tile grout all afternoon, and my lower back protests when I bend to collect my cleaning caddy. October in Naples means darkness falls early, and through the tall windows, I watch the sky turn that particular shade of orange-violet that makes the bay look like it's on fire. You heading out? Katerina appears in the doorway, already wearing her jacket, her hair pulled back from a face tired from 10 hours over hot stoves. She smells like rosemary and garlic from whatever elaborate dinner she'd prepared for Giordano's evening meeting. Yeah, long day. I stretch, feeling vertebrae pop. She studies my face with the particular intensity only siblings can manage. You look exhausted, Rosa. I'm fine. You always say that. She links her arm through mine as we walk toward the service entrance. Past rooms where men in expensive suits conduct business, I pretend not to understand. Lucia's school play is tonight. She's playing a tree. A tree? Third tree from the left in the enchanted forest. Very important role. Katerina's smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. I need to leave now to make it on time. Will you be okay walking alone? It's 15 minutes. I've done it hundreds of times. I know, but… She hesitates, glancing back toward the interior of the villa where voices murmur behind closed doors. Promise me you'll be careful. When am I not careful? I squeeze her arm. Go. Lucia needs her mother there, watching her be the best tree in Naples. She kisses my cheek and hurries toward the staff parking area where her ancient Fiat waits, leaving me alone in the cooling evening air. I pull my jacket tighter, the gray one with the villa's discreet embroidered logo on the chest that marks me as Esposito household staff, and start walking. The narrow street behind the villa is quieter than usual. Most of the shops have already closed, their windows dark except for security lights that cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. My shoes echo against ancient cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. I pass the bakery where I sometimes buy day-old bread, the tabaki with its faded awning, the small chapel where old women still light candles for sons and husbands who never came home from wars nobody remembers. 15 minutes. That's all it is. 15 minutes from the Esposito Villa to the bus stop on Via Foria. I've walked this route so many times I could do it blindfolded. The neighborhood was supposed to be safe. This was Esposito territory after all, and I'd heard the whispers about what that meant. Protection, order, rules enforced by men who didn't need to raise their voices, streets where women could walk alone after dark, because everyone knew the price of causing trouble in Giordano Esposito's domain. But as shadows lengthened between ancient buildings and the orange sky faded to purple-black, I heard them. Footsteps, matching my pace, deliberate and close. I walked faster. So did they. 3 men emerged from the alley ahead, blocking the narrow street. A 4th stepped out behind me, cutting off retreat. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stopped, calculating distances, escape routes, finding none. Lost, Bella? The leader spoke Italian with a thick Russian accent, his smile revealing gold teeth that caught the amber streetlight. He was perhaps 35, head shaved smooth, wearing a leather jacket too thin for October's chill. Long way from home for a pretty girl alone. I recognized the markings immediately. Bratva tattoos crawling up his neck from beneath his collar. Stars on his shoulders visible through the thin fabric of his shirt. Russian mob. My stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. I don't want trouble, I managed, voice steadier than I felt. I'm just trying to catch my bus. No trouble, no trouble. He stepped closer, and I smelled cigarettes and vodka on his breath. His eyes traveled down to my chest, focusing on the embroidered logo on my jacket. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, then something darker. Wait, I know that symbol. The taller man behind me moved closer. I felt his presence like a wall at my back. You work at the villa, the leader continued, gold teeth disappearing as his smile turned ugly. You work for him. I'm just a maid. I clean houses. I don't know anything. You know what that uniform means? He grabbed my collar, yanking me forward until his face was inches from mine. His breath was hot, rancid. Means you're his property. Means when we hurt you, we hurt him. The first blow came from behind, something hard, maybe a pipe, crashing across my shoulders. Pain exploded white-hot down my spine, dropping me to my knees on ancient cobblestones. I tried to scream, but a hand clamped over my mouth, grinding my lips against my teeth. I tasted copper, blood. Tell your boss, the Russian hissed in my ear, his hand like iron across my face, that Dmitry Volkov doesn't forget Tijuana. Tell him we're coming for everything he took from us, starting with what's his. Then they were all on me. Fists rained down. My back, my sides, my face. I curled inward, trying to protect my head, but there were too many of them. A boot caught my ribs, and something cracked inside me, a sound I felt more than heard. White light burst behind my eyes. Another kick to my stomach drove the air from my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only endure as the world narrowed to pain and the taste of blood and the rough texture of cobblestones against my cheek. Something metal, a pipe, a bar, struck my shoulder blade, then again across my back. The pain was enormous, swallowing everything else. This is just the beginning, someone said above me. Russian words I didn't understand, then Italian again. He thinks he owns Naples? We'll show him what we own. Another kick, another. I stopped counting after the fourth, stopped trying to protect myself, just curled as tight as possible and prayed for it to end. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Footsteps retreating, laughter fading into the darkness. I lay on wet cobblestones. When had it started raining? Watching their shadows disappear around a corner. 90 seconds, maybe. Felt like hours. Felt like my entire life had been reduced to those 90 seconds of violence. I don't remember deciding to move. Survival instinct, maybe. Muscle memory. I pushed myself to hands and knees, gasping at the agony in my ribs. Everything hurt. Everything was broken or bleeding or both. But I had to move. Had to get back. Had to... The villa. I could see its lights in the distance, warm and golden against the darkness. 15 minutes away. Might as well have been 15 kilometers. I crawled at first, then staggered to my feet, using the wall for support. Each step sent fresh waves of pain through my body. My left eye was swelling shut. Blood dripped from my split lip, from my nose, from somewhere on my scalp. I left a trail behind me, dark spots on pale stone. The service entrance loomed ahead. I'd cleaned those doors this morning. Now I pushed through them, leaving bloody handprints on wood I'd polished to a shine. The servants' hallway stretched before me, impossibly long. My legs gave out halfway down. I collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit on floors I'd mopped just hours ago. Cristo Santo! Alessandro, Giordano's head of security, appeared above me, his face transforming from confusion to fury in the space of a heartbeat. Who did this? Generosa, who? I couldn't answer. could barely breathe through the pain radiating from my ribs. "Get help!" Alessandro shouted to someone I couldn't see. "Now, get Dr. Russo and find—" What happened? The voice cut through everything, low, controlled, absolutely lethal. I'd heard that voice exactly 17 times in 9 months, always from a distance, always addressing someone else, never me, never saying my name. But I knew it was him. Giordano Esposito appeared in my narrowing field of vision, and for the first time in 9 months of invisible service, his eyes locked directly onto mine. Not through me, not past me, directly at me, with an intensity that would have stolen my breath if I had any left to steal. "Get Dr. Russo. Now!" Each word precisely measured, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "And somebody tell me what the fuck happened to her." Strong hands lifted me, surprisingly gentle for someone whose reputation was built on violence. I wanted to protest, to tell him I could walk, but my body had other ideas. My head lolled against something solid, his chest. I could smell cedar and gunpowder and expensive cologne. Through my one working eye, I saw his face properly for the first time. Dark eyes the color of espresso, now fixed on me with terrifying focus. His jaw was carved stone, a muscle ticking in his cheek. He looked at my face, the blood, the swelling, the damage, and something shifted in his expression, something dangerous. Generosa. He knew my name. How did he know my name? "Look at me. Who did this to you?" I tried to speak, but my split lips wouldn't cooperate. Blood bubbled when I attempted words. "Don't try to talk. Just—" He paused, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle. "Almost. Nod if you can hear me." I managed a slight movement of my head. "Good. That's good." He was walking now, carrying me through corridors I'd cleaned 1,000 times. "You're safe now. I've got you. You're safe." We reached a room I recognized, the blue guest suite on the second floor. I'd changed these linens yesterday. Now he was laying me on them, careful not to jar my injuries. The silk felt cool against my burning skin. "Who did this?" he asked again, his face inches from mine. "I need to know who did this to you." "Russians," I managed through lips that felt like they'd been split open. Each word was agony. "4 of them, Bratva tattoos, said to tell you." "Tell me what?" "Dmitry Volkov doesn't forget Tijuana." The words came out in a rush, using the last of my strength. "Coming for everything you took from him." Giordano went absolutely still. His expression shifted, recognition first, then understanding, then rage so pure and cold it was almost beautiful to witness, like watching a storm form over the bay, all that terrible power gathering. "Volkov," he said, and the name sounded like a death sentence in his mouth. Then Dr. Russo was there with his medical bag, and Giordano stepped back to let him work. But his eyes never left my face. For 9 months, I'd been invisible in his world. Not anymore. If you're captivated by Generosa's story and want to see how Giordano's revenge unfolds, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. Drop a comment below telling us what you think will happen next. We read every single one. Dr. Russo's hands were gentle but thorough, probing my ribs with practiced precision. Each touch sent fresh agony radiating through my torso. I bit down on my split lip to keep from crying out, tasting blood again. "Fractured rib, here." His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Possible concussion. Her pupils are reactive but uneven. Extensive bruising across the back and shoulders. The lip will need stitches." I drifted, consciousness slipping like water through cupped hands. Fragments of conversation floated around me. Giordano's voice, low and lethal, speaking rapid Italian into a phone. Alessandro's responses, clipped and efficient. The clink of medical instruments on metal. She needs observation for 48 hours minimum, Dr. Russo said, and I felt the sharp bite of a needle entering my arm. I'm giving her morphine for the pain. She'll drift for a while. Do whatever you need to do. Giordano's voice, closer now. Just make sure she's comfortable. I tried to sit up, panic cutting through the gathering fog of medication. My job. Katerina would be worried. The money. We couldn't afford for me to miss work. 63,000 euros didn't care if I was injured. I need to. The words came out slurred. My shift tomorrow. The debt payments? Lie down. Giordano's hand pressed gently against my shoulder, but the command in his voice was absolute. You're not working tomorrow or the next day. But the money. You work for me. That means you're under my protection. That includes getting paid while you recover. His face swam into focus above me, dark eyes intense. Do you understand? You don't worry about money. You worry about healing. The morphine pulled me under before I could argue. I surfaced occasionally over the next hours, catching fragments like a radio station drifting in and out of range. Giordano's voice on the phone, speaking Russian now, sharp, commanding. Alessandro's report. 4 men, Bratva markings. Viktor Kozlov is the leader. They're staying at a warehouse in Secondigliano. Giordano's response, cold as winter's sea. I want them alive, all 4. Bring them to the wine cellar. Through the morphine haze, memories surfaced, conversations I'd overheard while cleaning, whispers among staff who forgot I was there. The Tijuana incident. 3 years ago. Territorial war between the Esposito and Volkov families over smuggling routes through Mexico. Violence that left the streets running red for weeks. Dmitry Volkov's younger brother, Alexei, 22 years old, ambitious, reckless. He'd tried to ambush Giordano's convoy on the highway between Tijuana and Mexicali. The ambush failed. Alexei died in the crossfire, along with 8 of his men. Dmitry blamed Giordano, swore vendetta, but lacked the power to act. His empire fractured, his allies abandoned him. He fled back to Moscow, his pride shattered along with his organization. I thought the issue was buried with Alexei. Apparently, Dmitry disagreed. When I surfaced again, the room was darker. Night had fully fallen. Through the window, I could see the villa's grounds illuminated by security lights, and beyond them, the bay glittering like scattered diamonds. Voices drifted from the hallway, urgent, purposeful. The villa had transformed into something else entirely. Not a home, a war room. Men moved past my door carrying weapons they didn't bother to conceal. SUVs pulled out of the garage in formation, headlights cutting through darkness. I heard Alessandro coordinating. Team 1 to Secondigliano. Team 2 secures the perimeter. Team 3 stands by for... The door burst open. Katerina flew to my bedside, her face pale with panic, still wearing her kitchen apron. Rosa! Oh God! Rosa, they told me... She stopped, seeing my face properly. Her hand flew to her mouth. I'm okay, I managed, though my voice betrayed the lie. You're not okay. Look at you. Tears streamed down her face. Who did this? Why would anyone? Miss Udinese. Giordano appeared in the doorway and Caterina jumped. In 9 months of working in his kitchen, I doubted he'd ever addressed her directly. Your sister will be fine. Dr. Russo is monitoring her condition. She'll stay here for the next 48 hours under observation. I need to take care of her, Caterina said, finding her voice. She's my sister. You should return to your daughter, Giordano said, not unkindly. Lucia needs her mother tonight. Generosa will have round-the-clock medical care here, and you both will continue to receive full pay. This doesn't affect your employment. Caterina stared at him, processing. Then her eyes narrowed. Why do you care so much? She's just a maid. We're just staff. People like us, we're invisible to people like you. The silence that followed was absolute. Giordano stepped fully into the room, and even through my morphine fog, I felt the shift in atmosphere. He moved to stand beside my bed, his eyes never leaving my face. Your sister has worked in my home for 9 months, he said quietly. I know she organizes the library by publication date instead of title, because she thinks chronology matters to understanding an author's evolution. I know she leaves my morning coffee exactly 3 minutes to cool because she learned I hate it too hot. I know she waters the orchids in my study every Tuesday, not because anyone told her to, but because she noticed they were dying. My breath caught. He'd noticed all that? I know she never complains, never asks for anything, just shows up every single day and does her work with the kind of quiet competence most people wouldn't recognize if it saved their lives. He paused, and something raw flickered across his features. She was never invisible to me. I just didn't let myself admit how much I noticed until I saw her blood on floors she'd cleaned this morning. Caterina's mouth opened, closed. She looked between us, understanding dawning. So no, Giordano continued. She's not just a maid, and you're not just staff. You're both under my protection now, which means the men who did this will pay for every second she spent in pain. Outside, engines roared to life, more vehicles departing into the night, the machinery of retribution turning with mechanical precision. Caterina squeezed my hand once, then left to return to Lucia, though her expression said we'd be having a very long conversation later. The door clicked shut behind her. Giordano remained standing beside my bed, his hand resting on the mattress inches from mine. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. Rest now, he said softly. By the time you wake, everyone who touched you will understand their mistake. Through the window, I watched the last SUV pull away, red taillights disappearing down the villa's long drive. 50 men, Alessandro had said, mobilizing across Naples, Rome, Milan. Within 2 hours, contacts in Moscow activating dormant networks. All of this, for me. The morphine pulled me under again, but this time, I went willingly. Because for the first time in 9 months of being invisible, someone had truly seen me. And the city was about to learn what that meant. 2 o'clock in the morning. The warehouse in Secondigliano stood dark and silent, a skeletal structure of rusting metal in Naples's most dangerous district. Alessandro crouched behind an abandoned delivery truck, hand raised to signal his team. 12 men positioned around the building's perimeter, weapons ready, waiting for his command. Inside the warehouse, 4 Russians slept, believing themselves safe in territory they'd just violated. They were wrong. In his study 3 kilometers away, Giordano Esposito sat behind his desk, a glass of grappa untouched before him. The antique clock on the mantel ticked toward 2:15. His phone lay silent on the polished wood surface, waiting for Alessandro's confirmation. He should have seen this coming. should have known Dmitry Volkov wouldn't let Tijuana rest. 3 years ago, 2021, the Mexican border had been a powder keg of competing interests, cartels, Russian mob, Italian families all fighting for control of smuggling routes from South America through Mexico into the United States. Giordano had been 26, barely 3 years into inheriting his father's empire, still proving himself capable of holding what he'd been given. Alexei Volkov had been 22. Dmitry's younger brother, handsome and reckless, and convinced the world owed him power he hadn't earned. He'd wanted the Tijuana routes, wanted them badly enough to try taking them by force. The ambush happened on Highway 2, between Tijuana and Mexicali. 10 vehicles, 30 men, coordinated attack on Giordano's convoy. Should have worked. Would have worked, if Alexei hadn't been too eager, if he'd waited 5 more minutes, if he'd positioned his men better. But he didn't wait. And when the shooting started, it was chaos. Bullets tearing through metal, men screaming, the desert sun beating down on carnage that lasted maybe 4 minutes. When the dust settled, Alexei Volkov lay dead with 8 of his men. Giordano had lost 3. Dmitry blamed him, swore vendetta at his brother's funeral, promised that Giordano would pay in blood for blood. But Dmitry lacked Alexei's recklessness. He was careful, calculating, and he recognized he didn't have the power to challenge Esposito directly. His allies abandoned him, his organization fractured. Within 6 months, he'd fled back to Moscow, and Giordano thought the matter buried with Alexei in Mexican soil. Apparently, some wounds don't heal, some grudges don't fade. His phone vibrated. Alessandro's text. In position, awaiting your order. Giordano typed 1 word. Go. The warehouse raid was surgical. Alessandro's team moved with the precision of men who'd done this 100 times before. Doors breached simultaneously. Front, back, loading bay. Flash grenades detonating, disorienting. Then silence, broken only by Russian cursing and the metallic click of weapons being readied. 3 men captured within 90 seconds, dragged from sleeping bags and zip-tied before they fully understood what was happening. But Viktor Kozlov, the one with gold teeth and Bratva tattoos crawling up his neck, had better instincts. He rolled toward the emergency exit, fired 3 shots blindly behind him, and ran. Alessandro pursued, leaving his men to secure the captured Russians. Victor crashed through a rusted door and onto the roof, 4 stories of crumbling concrete and exposed rebar. Secondigliano's sprawl stretched around him, laundry lines strung between buildings, satellite dishes like metal flowers. The labyrinth of Naples' poorest district. Victor ran. Alessandro followed. The chase wound through Secondigliano's rooftop geography, leaping gaps between buildings, scrambling up fire escapes, sliding down drainage pipes. Victor was younger, faster, but Alessandro knew these streets, had grown up in this district before Giordano's father recruited him 20 years ago. Dawn was breaking over the Bay of Naples when Alessandro finally cornered Victor on a rooftop overlooking the water. The Russian stood at the edge, chest heaving, gun empty. Below, the city was waking. Fishermen heading to their boats, early buses rumbling through narrow streets, the smell of coffee drifting from opening cafes. "Nowhere left to run," Alessandro said in Russian, weapon-trained center mass. Victor laughed, bitter and exhausted. "You think this changes anything? Volkov has 200 men. You killed his brother. He'll burn Naples to ash before he forgives that. Then he'll burn with it." Alessandro moved forward. "On your knees. Hands behind your head. For a moment, Victor looked like he might jump. 4 stories onto cobblestones. Quick death instead of what waited at the villa. But survival instinct won over pride. He sank to his knees. Message received, Alessandro said into his radio as he zip-tied Victor's wrists. Package secured. All 4 targets in custody. They weren't expecting retaliation this fast. Below, black vans pulled up to collect their cargo. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and Katerina asleep in a chair beside my bed, her head at an uncomfortable angle against the upholstery, still wearing yesterday's kitchen apron. My body catalogued damage as consciousness returned, fractured ribs screaming with each breath, face swollen and tender, shoulder blade throbbing where the pipe had struck. But I was alive. And in a room more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever slept. Fragmented memories surfaced. The attack. Giordano carrying me. His voice. You were never just a maid. The sound of vehicles departing into darkness. And something else. Morphine-hazed impressions of phone calls, orders given, machinery of violence beginning to turn. I pushed myself upright, gasping at the pain. Katerina stirred, but didn't wake. Through the window, I could see the villa's front drive, and as I watched, black vans rolled through the gates. 3 of them, moving in formation, windows tinted dark. They stopped at a side entrance I'd never used. Men emerged, opened the rear doors. Even from here, I could see figures being dragged out, 4 of them, hands bound, struggling against their captors. My breath caught. He'd found them already, less than 12 hours, and Giordano had found the men who attacked me. The reality sank in slowly, heavy as stones. This was happening because of me. Those men were being taken somewhere. The wine cellar, I remembered through morphine fog. Because they'd put their hands on someone Giordano Esposito considered under his protection. I should have felt horror. Should have felt guilt at the violence I'd set in motion. Instead, something else unfurled in my chest. Something warm and dark and deeply wrong. I felt protected. A soft knock at the door. Dr. Russo entered, medical bag in hand, his expression professionally neutral. You're awake. How's the pain? Manageable. A lie. Everything hurt. He checked my vitals, examined my pupils, pressed gently along my ribs. I bit back gasps, determined not to show weakness. When he reached for a syringe, I shook my head. No more morphine. I need to think clearly. The pain will be significant. I can handle it. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. As you wish. But if it becomes unbearable, call for me. You're healing, but these injuries need time. After he left, I managed to stand, using the bedpost for support. Every muscle protested. Through the window, I watched the last of the black vans drive toward the villa's underground entrance, the one that led to storage areas, wine cellars, and rooms I'd never been allowed to clean. Far below, deep in the villa's foundations, I heard a sound. Metal scraping against stone. A heavy door opening. The wine cellar. Katerina woke then, saw me standing, and rushed to help me back to bed. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 4 men being led into darkness. Couldn't stop thinking about what Giordano had promised. By the time you wake, everyone who touched you will understand their mistake. The sun rose higher over the Bay of Naples, golden light spilling across water. Beautiful morning, perfect October weather. Somewhere below me, in rooms carved from volcanic stone, judgment was about to be rendered. And God help me, I wanted to watch. 6 o'clock in the morning. I lay in silk sheets, staring at the frescoed ceiling, while Katerina's soft breathing filled the room. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw gold teeth and felt fists connecting with my ribs. Heard Russian accented Italian promising that this was just the beginning. Then I heard something else. Voices. Rising from somewhere deep below the villa, muffled by stone and distance but distinct enough to make out the cadence of interrogation. The wine cellars. I'd cleaned the upper level once, a vast chamber of temperature-controlled storage where bottles worth thousands of euros aged in darkness. But I'd heard whispers among staff about lower levels, rooms carved from volcanic rock that went down 3 stories, accessible only through reinforced doors that required codes I didn't have. Against every instinct of self-preservation, I needed to know what was happening down there. I slipped from bed, moving carefully to avoid waking Katerina. Each breath sent pain radiating through my fractured rib, but I'd refused the morphine for exactly this reason. I needed clarity, needed to understand what I'd set in motion. The servants' stairs were narrow and steep, designed for staff to move invisibly through the villa. I knew these corridors intimately. 9 months of cleaning had mapped them in my muscle memory. Down one level, then another. The voices grew louder as I descended, echoing up through stone that had stood for centuries. The reinforced door to the lower cellar stood ajar, just slightly, maybe 15 centimeters. Enough. I pressed myself against the wall, positioned where I could see through the gap without being visible from inside. What I witnessed made my blood turn to ice water. 4 men bound to metal chairs in a room carved from dark volcanic stone. Viktor Kozlov, with his gold teeth and bratva tattoos. The tall, silent one who'd held me while Viktor beat me. 2 others I recognized from those 90 seconds that felt like hours. All bloodied, noses broken, lips split, the kind of damage that came from professional interrogation. Giordano stood before them in rolled shirt sleeves, perfectly composed despite the blood on his knuckles. Alessandro flanked him, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. The air in that stone chamber felt heavy, charged with the certainty of violence not yet finished. Volkov will paint Naples red for this, Viktor spat through broken teeth, trying for defiance but achieving only desperation. You think taking us changes anything? He has 200 men. You're already dead, Esposito. You just don't know it yet. Giordano's response was terrifyingly calm. Dmitri sent you to attack a housemaid, not a soldier, not a rival, not even someone involved in our business, a 26-year-old woman walking home after a 12-hour shift. He stepped closer to Viktor, and even from my hidden position, I felt the temperature drop. So let me understand your strategy. You decided that hurting someone completely innocent, someone with no power and no protection, would somehow prove Dmitri's strength? She works for you. That makes her yours. Hurting what's yours. She's not property. The words came out like bullets. She's a person who cleans my house and arranges flowers and makes sure the coffee cools exactly 3 minutes because she pays attention to details nobody else notices, and you put your hands on her. Viktor laughed, bitter and broken. You're going to war over a fucking maid? That's what this is about? The silence that followed was absolute. When Giordano finally spoke, his voice was quiet enough that I had to strain to hear. Why now? Why come back after 3 years? What's Volkov planning? I don't... Alessandro moved and Viktor screamed. I couldn't see what happened, but the sound made my stomach clench. Try again, Giordano said, still perfectly calm. Why now? Why her? What's Dmitri planning? Viktor broke. Words tumbling out between gasps of pain. He's in Rome, has been for 2 weeks, planning to hit your supply lines across Italy, Naples, Milan, Genoa. The attack on her was meant to be a distraction, proof that you can't even protect your own household. Show your allies you're weak, vulnerable, then move on the real targets. Who's helping him? Chechen networks, Armenians in Milan, maybe the Calabrians, but that's not confirmed. Giordano absorbed this information with a single nod. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke in fluent Russian. Even without understanding the language, I heard the authority in his voice, the absolute certainty. Dmitri, he said, switching to Italian so everyone in the room could understand. I have your men, all 4 of them. They're sitting in my wine cellar explaining your strategy to me, which suggests they're not as loyal as you hoped. He paused, listening. Victor's face had gone pale. Here's what's going to happen, Giordano continued. You have until sunrise tomorrow to leave Italy. Every hour you remain, I close one of your operations. Every day, I take one of your people. You wanted to remind me of Tijuana? Let me remind you why you ran. Your brother died because he was reckless and stupid. You're about to die for the same reasons, unless you're smart enough to leave while I'm still offering the option. Another pause. Then, you made a fundamental error, Dmitri. You assumed she didn't matter, that she was expendable, that I wouldn't burn your entire organization to ash for touching her. You assumed wrong. He ended the call and looked at Victor. Your employer has 16 hours to make his decision. Pray he's smarter than his brother was. I retreated before they could discover me, climbing the servants' stairs as quickly as my injured body allowed. Each step was agony, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd witnessed. That violence, that power, the casual certainty with which Giordano had just declared war. All of it because 4 men attacked me in a dark street. I should have been terrified, should have been horrified at the brutality, at the blood on his knuckles, at the screams echoing up from volcanic stone. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Something warm and fierce and deeply inappropriate given the circumstances. I felt protected, valued, like I mattered in a way I never had before. Back in the guest room, I stood at the window watching dawn break over the Bay of Naples. Fishing boats headed out to sea, their lights bobbing on dark water. The city waking up, oblivious to the war being fought in wine cellars and phone calls made in Russian. You were listening. I spun, gasping at the pain in my ribs. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. There was no point denying it. Yes. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. What you feel for him right now, it's gratitude mixed with trauma. Your brain is trying to process violence by attaching to the person who's protecting you from more of it. Be careful, Generosa. That's not what this is. You sure about that? Because I've seen this pattern before. Women who fall for men who save them, only to realize later they fell for the salvation, not the savior. I thought about Giordano's voice in that cellar, his rage on my behalf, the way he'd said she's not property, like the concept personally offended him. It's not just gratitude, I said quietly. I know what that feels like. This is something else. Alessandro studied me for a long moment. Then God help you both, because once you start down this path, there's no going back to being invisible. You'll be a target, a weakness. Everything he cares about becomes leverage in this world. Maybe I don't want to be invisible anymore. He smiled, sad and knowing. That's what I was afraid you'd say. By sunrise the next day, Naples had transformed into a city holding its breath. Word spread through criminal networks like fire through dry grass. Giordano Esposito was hunting. 3 Russian-owned businesses closed overnight. a shipping company in Naples Port District, a restaurant in Rome's Trastevere neighborhood, a nightclub in Milan's fashion quarter. No violence, no destruction. Just shuttered doors and vanished employees, leaving behind empty buildings and the unmistakable message, "Leave or be erased." I learned this from fragments of conversation drifting through my open door as men came and went from Giordano's study. Alessandro's reports, phone calls in multiple languages, the machinery of an empire mobilizing with terrifying efficiency. I spent the next 48 hours in the guest room, my body slowly remembering how to exist without constant agony. Dr. Russo checked on me twice daily, changed bandages, monitored my fractured ribs healing. Katerina brought meals from the kitchen, soups I could eat without straining my split lip, bread soft enough not to hurt my bruised jaw. And Giordano visited, not as an employer checking on injured staff, but something else entirely. The first time, he brought coffee. Real coffee, not the cheap instant I drank at home. He set it on the bedside table, pulled a chair close, and simply sat. Didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just existed in the same space, like his presence alone could keep me safe. After 10 minutes of silence, I found my voice. "You don't have to do this. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You have a fractured rib and bruises that will take weeks to fade." His dark eyes studied my face with unsettling intensity. "But you will be fine. I'll make sure of it." By starting a war? By finishing one that Volkov started 3 years ago. He leaned back in the chair, and for the first time since I'd known of his existence, he looked almost relaxed. "Tell me about yourself, Generosa. Your real life, not the version you show while cleaning my house." So I did. Told him about growing up in Bari, about our mother who died when I was 19, about helping raise Katerina even though she was technically my older sister, about the fishing boat business my father built over 30 years, the small crew of men who depended on it for their livelihoods, the slow death by 1,000 cuts as protection payments bled everything dry. 63,000 euros, I said, the number bitter in my mouth. That's what's left. Papa signed papers he didn't fully understand. Accepted interest rates that compounded faster than we could pay. Now Katerina and I send money home every month, and the debt never seems to shrink. Something shifted in Giordano's expression, a hardening around his eyes. Who ran the protection racket? The Santoro family out of Bari. Small operation, but they control the fishing industry there. You pay or you don't fish. Not anymore. He said it with such finality that I knew the Santoro family's days were numbered. Consider that problem handled. Giordano, you can't just... I can. I will. He stood, moved to the window overlooking the bay. Tell me what you dreamed about before the debt. Before your mother died. What did 20-year-old Generosa want from life? The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in years. I wanted to study literature, maybe teach. I loved books, stories, the way words could build entire worlds. I laughed, though it hurt my ribs. Stupid dream for a girl from Bari's poorest district. Not stupid, deferred. He turned back to face me. Dreams don't die, Generosa. They just wait for circumstances to change. Over the next 2 days he returned, each visit longer than the last. And slowly, carefully, he let me see beneath the crime lord's armor. His childhood in Palermo, poverty and violence, a father who taught him that power was the only language the world respected. At 14, he'd been sent to Moscow to learn from Bratva networks, spent 3 years in a world of ice and cruelty, that made Naples look gentle by comparison. At 17, shipped to Tijuana to cut his teeth on cartel wars where death came cheap and life cheaper. I inherited an empire I never wanted, he said during one visit, his voice quiet. My father died when I was 23. Heart attack, sudden and violent. He left me 200 families who depended on us for work, protection, justice the law wouldn't provide. I could have walked away, sold everything, disappeared. He paused. But I learned to wield what he built better than anyone expected, including myself. Do you regret it? I asked. The life you chose? I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it well. On the second afternoon, Caterina brought Lucia to visit. My 8-year-old niece burst into the room with the unstoppable energy of children, then stopped short when she saw my face. The bruises had ripened into spectacular shades of purple and yellow. Auntie Rosa, you look like a painting, she said, wide-eyed. A scary painting. Thanks, Piccola. That's exactly what I was going for. Lucia climbed carefully onto the bed beside me, mindful of my injuries in the way children can be when properly instructed. Mama said some bad men hurt you. Why did they do that? Before I could answer, Giordano appeared in the doorway. Lucia turned, saw him, and her eyes went even wider. She'd probably never been this close to the man whose home her mother worked in. Because they made a mistake, Giordano said gently, crossing to sit in his usual chair. But mistakes get corrected. How? Lucia asked with the direct curiosity only children possess. By making sure they can never hurt anyone again. After Caterina and Lucia left, I confronted him. You can't solve everything with violence. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works. He met my eyes steadily. I can't solve anything without it. That's the reality of what I am, what I do. The question isn't whether violence is right or wrong. It's whether you can live in a world where it's necessary, whether you can live with me. Before I could respond, Alessandro appeared at the door, his expression grim. We have a problem. Volkov's not leaving. Giordano stood immediately. What's he doing? Rallying allies. He's called in Chechen networks, reached out to Armenians in Milan. This is escalating beyond a simple vendetta. Alessandro glanced at me, then back to Giordano. He's preparing for all-out war. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Giordano's expression hardened into something absolutely lethal. Then we escalate faster. Close 6 more of his operations. Tonight, I want every Russian-connected business from Naples to Milan shut down by morning. No violence, just make them disappear. Show Volkov and his allies what happens when you refuse reasonable terms. By nightfall, the villa had transformed into a command center. Men came and went with military precision. Phone calls in Russian, Italian, Spanish. Maps spread across dining tables. The organized dismantling of Dmitry Volkov's Italian presence happening with surgical efficiency. I watched from my window as vehicles departed into darkness, returning hours later with reports of success. A warehouse in Genoa, emptied and locked. A money transfer office in Florence, closed. Employees vanished. A restaurant in Bologna serving as a front for weapons smuggling, shuttered. Inventory seized. 6 operations in one night, gone like they'd never existed. The criminal underworld of Italy was watching. Word spread through networks that had operated for generations. Giordano Esposito had gone to war over a housemaid. If he'd do this for someone who supposedly didn't matter, what would he do to protect his actual interests? Every man connected to organized crime from Sicily to the Alps went to bed that night terrified. Not of Giordano's violence, that they understood, but of his precision, his control, the way he could dismantle entire operations without firing a single shot. The city held its breath, waiting to see what came next. And in a guest room overlooking the Bay of Naples, I held my breath too. Because somewhere in the past 48 hours, between coffee brought with careful hands and conversations about dreams deferred, I'd stopped being afraid of Giordano Esposito. I'd started falling for him instead. Day 4 after the attack. My bruises had faded from violent purple to sickly yellow-green, and I could breathe without gasping if I moved carefully. The fractured rib was healing, Dr. Russo assured me, but it would take weeks before I felt normal again. I was tired of waiting. I need to work, I told Giordano that morning when he brought coffee. Our ritual now, these quiet moments before the villa woke fully. Light duties. Anything. I can't just sit in this room anymore. Dr. Russo said. Dr. Russo isn't the one going insane from inactivity. I set down the cup, met his eyes. I need normalcy, Giordano. I need to feel useful, not like some fragile thing everyone has to tiptoe around. His jaw tightened. You're injured. You need rest. I've been resting for 4 days, please. I hated the pleading note in my voice, but I was desperate. I'm not asking to scrub floors or carry supplies, just something, anything. We compromised. His personal library, 2 floors of floor-to-ceiling shelves holding volumes in Italian, Russian, Spanish, English. Sitting work, no heavy lifting. I could organize, catalog, create order from the chaos of books acquired faster than they could be properly shelved. Touch nothing in the study, he warned. The library only, and if you feel pain, you stop immediately. Yes, sir, I said, unable to keep the smile from my lips despite the ache it caused. The library was a revelation, leather-bound first editions next to paperback thrillers, philosophy texts wedged between crime novels, poetry collections, Dante, Pushkin, Neruda, their spines cracked from repeated reading. This was Giordano's private world, and every book told me something new about the man who commanded empires, but still read Dostoevsky before bed. I was organizing the Russian section, Tolstoy, Bulgakov, Akhmatova, when a photograph slipped from between pages. Old, the edges worn soft with handling. A boy of maybe 16, dark-haired and serious, arm around a girl about the same age. She had his eyes, his sharp cheekbones, but where his expression was guarded, hers was open, laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. His sister, Valentina. I jumped, nearly dropping the photo. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I didn't mean to pry, I said quickly. It just fell out. It's fine. He crossed to stand beside me, looking at the image. She was killed in crossfire when he was 19. Wrong place, wrong time. Rival family trying to send a message to his father. She was just walking home from university. My throat tightened. Like me. Exactly like you. Alessandro met my eyes. That's when he stopped being human and started being Esposito. He spent 6 months hunting down everyone involved. Not just the shooters. Everyone. The men who ordered it, the ones who supplied weapons, the lookouts, the drivers. 37 people died. And when it was over, no one questioned his father's succession plans anymore. The photograph suddenly felt heavy in my hands. This context reframed everything. The overprotection, the absolute fury when he saw my blood, the war he'd started over my attack. I wasn't just a housemaid to him. I was history repeating, and this time he had the power to change the ending. I was carefully replacing the photograph when my phone buzzed. Katerina. Turn on the news. Rome, now. The television in the library showed breaking coverage. Car bomb outside Ristorante Bella Vista in Rome's Parioli district. The building's facade was destroyed, windows shattered across the street. But miraculously, no casualties. The restaurant had been closed for private dinner service that never happened because someone had called in a bomb threat 30 minutes before detonation. A warning, a message. Volkov making his move. Giordano appeared in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from ice. He ended the call, looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Cold, absolute rage. I'm going to Rome, he said, ending this tonight. You'll stay here with Alessandro and 20 men. The villa is a fortress. You'll be safe. This started because of me, I protested, standing despite the pain in my ribs. You should stay alive. He crossed to me in 3 strides, gripped my shoulders with careful intensity. That's all that matters. Volkov wants to draw me out, wants me emotional and reckless. I won't give him that, but I also won't leave you unprotected. Giordano. He kissed me. Desperate, fierce, filled with everything we'd left unspoken over 4 days of careful conversation and coffee, brought with gentle hands. His fingers threaded through my hair, careful not to jar my healing injuries, and I tasted coffee and determination and something darker, the promise of violence to come. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. When I come back, he said quietly, we're going to talk about this, about us. But right now, I need you safe while I handle Volkov. Come back to me, I whispered. Always. He left within the hour, taking 12 men in 3 armored vehicles. Alessandro moved Caterina, Lucia, and me to the villa's safe room. A reinforced chamber in the lowest level with supplies for days, communications equipment, and walls thick enough to withstand anything short of military-grade explosives. This is excessive, Caterina said, watching Alessandro check weapons with practiced efficiency. We're in the most secure building in Naples. Volkov is desperate, Alessandro replied. Desperate men do stupid things. Better excessive than unprepared. Hours crawled past. Lucia slept on a cot in the corner, exhausted by the strange adventure. Caterina and I sat in silence, listening to communications crackle over the radio, fragments of reports, Alessandro coordinating with his men, but nothing from Rome. You love him, Caterina said finally, not a question. I thought about denying it. Couldn't. I don't know what I feel. It's only been 4 days. Maybe it's just gratitude mixed with trauma. Stockholm Syndrome for someone who protected me. Or maybe it's real. She squeezed my hand. Real things can grow from broken beginnings, Rosa. Our parents met during a storm that destroyed half of Bari. Mama always said the best foundations are built on surviving something terrible together. 2:00 in the morning. Gunfire erupted in the distance. Not Rome, but here in Naples. Close. Too close. Caterina's grip on my hand tightened. Alessandro's voice crackled over the intercom. Stay calm. Perimeter is secure. Do not leave the safe room under any circumstances. The gunfire intensified, then stopped abruptly. Silence more terrifying than noise. What's happening? Katerina whispered. The intercom crackled again. Alessandro's voice carried grim satisfaction. Volkov sent a team to hit the villa while Giordano was in Rome. Predictable strategy. What he didn't know is that Giordano anticipated it. Left 25 men here instead of 20, positioned at every entrance. The attacking team walked into a trap. We have them in custody. 8 men, all Chechen. Is anyone hurt? I asked. 2 of theirs with minor injuries, none of ours. It was over in 90 seconds. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by new fear. Giordano had anticipated this. Had left me protected while knowing Volkov would try exactly what he tried. But what was happening in Rome? As if summoning him with thought, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's done. Coming home. G. 3 hours later, headlights swept across the villa's entrance. I watched from the safe room's monitors as vehicles pulled through the gates. 3 black SUVs moving in formation. Men emerged, weapons secured, and then Giordano, alive and whole, speaking with Alessandro in the courtyard. His voice came over the intercom. It's safe. You can come up. I met him in his study, unable to wait any longer. He looked exhausted, his suit jacket discarded, blood on his shirt sleeve that I prayed wasn't his. When he saw me, something in his expression softened. Volkov? I asked. Will never threaten anyone again. He pulled me carefully against him, mindful of my injuries. It's over, Generosa. You're safe. Everyone who touched you, everyone who planned it, everyone who thought you were expendable, they've all learned otherwise. I should have asked for details, should have demanded to know what happened in Rome. Instead, I just held on to him, breathing in cedar and gunpowder and the promise of safety. You came back, I whispered. I told you I would. His lips brushed my temple. Always. We sat in his study as dawn broke over the bay of Naples, and Giordano told me what happened in Rome. Volkov was hiding in Trastevere, he began, voice rough with exhaustion. Old district, narrow streets, the kind of place where tourists get lost looking for authentic restaurants. He thought the maze would protect him. Thought I wouldn't risk civilian casualties in such a crowded area. But you found him anyway. I had 40 men surrounding the building before he even knew we were there. Network contacts from across Italy, Naples, Milan, Genoa, Florence. Everyone I've built relationships with over 12 years. He poured grappa into 2 glasses, slid one across the desk to me. Volkov had 15 men inside, outgunned, outmaneuvered, and he knew it. I sipped the grappa, felt it burn down my throat. Through the window, I watched the sky turn from purple to pink to gold. Beautiful morning, perfect October weather. And somewhere in Rome, 12 men had died. I gave him a choice, Giordano continued. Called his phone, told him to leave Italy tonight, never return, and I'd let him live. Clean exit, no retribution. Just disappear. What did he say? He said he'd rather die than run again. Giordano's expression was carved stone. So I told him that could be arranged. The assault was swift, brutal, absolute. Giordano's men breached the safe house from 4 entry points simultaneously. Flash grenades, then systematic clearing of each room. Volkov's men surrendered within minutes. They were soldiers, professionals, and they recognized when they were beaten. No point dying for pride when your employer had already lost. But Volkov himself held out in an upper room with 3 loyal men, barricaded, armed, defiant to the bitter end. He asked if I thought this made me strong, Giordano said quietly. Destroying him over a woman, like you were some trophy I was protecting instead of a person I... He stopped, took a long drink. I told him it made me human, something he never understood. His brother died because Alexei was reckless and stupid. Dmitri was about to die for the same reasons. I didn't ask for details about the execution, didn't need them. The outcome was written in Giordano's exhaustion, in the blood on his shirt sleeve that he'd forgotten to change, in the weight that hung around him like a physical thing. By dawn, Volkov's entire empire had been dismantled. Every operation from Naples to Milan to Rome, seized or shut down. Every safe house cleared. Every ally contacted with the same message. This is what happens when you touch what's mine. Messages sent to Moscow, to Chechen networks, to Armenian contacts. The criminal underworld from Italy to Russia now knew. Giordano Esposito had gone to war over a housemaid, and he'd won absolutely. 12 men died, he said finally, meeting my eyes, including Volkov. Does it matter? Yes, I whispered. It matters. Why? They came to Naples planning to hurt you, to use you as leverage, to prove I was weak. They miscalculated. That's not your fault. But it's my face they saw when they made that choice, my uniform that marked me as yours. You were never mine, Generosa. You were always your own person. They just didn't understand that hurting you would hurt me. He stood, moved around the desk to where I sat. 12 men are dead because they thought violence was a language I'd understand and respond to with negotiation. They were right about the language, wrong about my response. I should have felt horror, should have been sick at the violence done in my name, at the blood spilled because 4 men recognized a logo on my jacket. Instead, I felt something else entirely, protected, chosen, valued in a way I never had been in my entire life. I don't know if I can live with what you did for me, I said quietly. Giordano crouched before my chair, took my hands in his blood-stained ones. You can, because I'll be here to help carry it. You didn't ask for this, didn't want it, but it happened, and now we both have to live with the consequences. And if I can't, then we figure it out together. But Generosa, his grip tightened fractionally. Don't ask me to regret protecting you. Don't ask me to wish I'd chosen differently, because I wouldn't. I'd do it again, every time. Outside, the sun had fully risen. I could hear the villa waking, staff arriving, vehicles in the courtyard, the sound of captured men being transferred somewhere I didn't want to know about. The 8 Chechens who'd attacked the villa last night, adding to Volkov's body count of failed strategies. Alessandro appeared at the door. It's over. Volkov is dead. His entire network is scattered. Moscow has already disavowed him. They're calling it an unauthorized operation, claiming they had no knowledge of his Italian activities. Convenient, Giordano said without turning. Politics. Alessandro's gaze shifted to me. How are you holding up? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. After Alessandro left, Caterina found me in the courtyard, watching captured men being loaded into unmarked vans. She stood beside me in silence for several minutes before speaking. You didn't ask for this, she said finally. But you're part of his world now. The question is whether you want to be. I thought about Giordano's hands, gentle despite their capacity for violence. His voice telling me I was never just a maid. The way he'd noticed details about me for 9 months, while I thought I was invisible. The library organized by publication date. The coffee cooled exactly 3 minutes. The empire he'd mobilized because 4 men made the mistake of thinking I didn't matter. I don't know, I whispered. I should be horrified, should be running back to Bari and never looking back. But Katerina, you feel safe with him. I feel seen. For the first time in my life, someone sees me completely. The debt, the exhaustion, the dreams I buried, and thinks I'm worth protecting anyway. That's not nothing, Rosa. She squeezed my shoulder. But it's also not everything. You need to decide if you can live in a world where love is measured in bodies buried and empires dismantled. Hours later, after the captured men had been taken away and the villa returned to something resembling normalcy, Giordano found me still in the courtyard. He'd showered, changed into clean clothes, but exhaustion lined his face. We didn't speak at first, just stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of violence and survival. "It's done," he said finally. "You're safe. Everyone who touched you is gone. Everyone who planned it. Everyone who thought you were expendable. Everyone who believed hurting you wouldn't have consequences. They've all learned otherwise." "How many people know?" I asked. "About what you did? About why?" "By now, everyone." A slight smile touched his lips. Tired, but genuine. "The entire criminal underworld of Italy received the message this morning. Giordano Esposito went to war over a housemaid. Every man connected to organized crime from Sicily to the Alps is terrified." "Why terrified?" "Because if I'll do this for someone who supposedly didn't matter, who was invisible, who was just cleaning my house, what would I do to protect something that actually matters to me?" He turned to face me fully. "The power dynamic has shifted permanently, not because of violence, but because of what the violence represented. I chose you over strategic advantage, over peace, over easier options. That's the kind of unpredictability that terrifies rational actors." The weight of that settled over me. I wasn't just Generosa Udinese anymore. 26-year-old maid from Bari with crushing debt and deferred dreams. I was the woman for whom Esposito had gone to war, the one who'd changed the calculations of every criminal enterprise in Italy. "I don't know if I can be that person," I admitted. "You already are." He stepped closer, cupped my face with surprising gentleness. "The question is whether you want to be, whether you can live in this world, with me, knowing what I'm capable of, what I've done, what I'll do again if anyone threatens you." I thought about 12 bodies in Rome, about Volkov's empire dismantled in a single night, about the terror rippling through criminal networks because one man had proven he valued a housemaid's life over political strategy. And I thought about being seen, really, truly seen for the first time in 26 years. "Yes," I whispered. "I want to be." His kiss was gentle this time, nothing desperate or fierce, just honest. A promise made in morning sunlight while the city below held its breath, waiting to see what came next. By sunrise, they'd all understood. Now I had to learn to live with that understanding too. Before we conclude Generosa and Giordano's story, I want to ask for your support. If this tale moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. These stories take time and passion to create, and your engagement truly makes a difference. Thank you for being here. 2 weeks later, I could breathe without pain. Dr. Russo examined my ribs one final time, pressed along the fracture site, and nodded with professional satisfaction. "Healed beautifully," You're cleared for normal activity. No more restrictions. Normal activity. As if anything about my life was normal anymore. I'd been officially promoted to personal assistant to Giordano Esposito, a title that meant everything and nothing. My salary had tripled. Benefits included health insurance I could actually use, paid time off I'd never had before, and a security detail that followed me everywhere despite my protests. "You don't need to pay me this much," I'd told Giordano when he showed me the contract. "It's excessive. It's fair compensation for your work. You've been managing my schedule, organizing correspondence, translating documents. You've earned it." He'd slid another paper across his desk. "This is your signing bonus." The number made my breath catch. 63,000 euros. Exactly. "Giordano, I didn't ask you to." "You didn't have to. You work for me. I take care of my people." His expression brooked no argument. "The debt is paid. Your father's business is refinanced, anonymously. The Santoro family's protection racket in Bari has been discontinued. Consider it handled." I'd visited Papa the following weekend. Found him in his small house near the harbor, the one I'd grown up in, the one we'd feared losing for 3 years. He'd opened the door with tears streaming down his weathered face. "The debt," he'd gasped, pulling me into a crushing embrace. "Rosa, the debt is gone. All of it. Someone paid it off, refinanced the business, everything. We're free. After 3 years, we're finally free." I held him while he cried, knowing exactly who had saved him but unable to say the words. That knowledge sat in my chest like a weight and a gift, heavy with what it represented, precious for what it meant. Back in Naples, my relationship with Giordano deepened in ways I was still learning to navigate. No longer invisible, I attended meetings where men twice my age discussed territory and influence. Sat beside him at the head of the table, offering counsel he actually listened to. Watched the criminal underworld adjust to the reality that Generosa Udinese was not to be touched, not to be threatened, not even to be looked at wrong. I'd become a symbol, the woman for whom Esposito had gone to war. Every conversation I had with his associates carried the unspoken weight of that knowledge. They treated me with respect bordering on fear, not because of who I was, but because of what I represented. "You're different now," Katerina observed one afternoon in the kitchen. We'd both kept our positions despite my promotion, her because she genuinely loved cooking, me because the villa felt like home now in ways our cramped apartment never had. More confident, like you finally understand your own worth. "I'm learning," I admitted. "It's strange, being seen after so long invisible." "He's different too." She chopped vegetables with practiced precision. "Still dangerous, maybe more dangerous actually, but anchored, like he was drifting before, and you gave him something to hold on to." I thought about that later, watching Giordano work in his study. She was right. He was softer with me, gentle hands that had killed 12 men now arranging flowers on my desk because he'd noticed I liked fresh blooms. But harder with everyone else, his reputation enhanced by what he'd done for a housemaid. The message had been received across Italy. Esposito protected what was his with absolute finality. "You made me remember what it's like to care about something other than survival," he'd told me one night, his head in my lap while I read poetry aloud. Neruda, his favorite. For 12 years, everything was strategy, power, maintaining what my father built. Then you walked into my world with your quiet competence and deferred dreams, and suddenly, survival wasn't enough anymore. "What is enough?" I'd asked. "This. You. Building something worth protecting instead of just protecting what exists." Evening on the villa's terrace. We sat together watching the sunset paint the Bay of Naples in shades of orange and gold. The city sprawled below us, ancient, dangerous, beautiful. Fishing boats returned to harbor. Traffic snarled on coastal roads. Life continuing as it always had, oblivious to the changes happening in this villa on the hillside. I traced the scars on Giordano's hands, maps of violence written in raised tissue, a knife wound across his palm from Moscow when he was 16, burn marks from Tijuana at 24, broken knuckles that had healed wrong, testament to fights won through brutality rather than skill. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "Everything you did? The 12 men in Rome, Volkov, all of it." He was silent for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty. "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it." He turned to face me, dark eyes intense in the fading light. "If I could have protected you without violence, I would have. But that's not the world we live in. So I chose you over peace, over strategic advantage, over easier options. And I'd choose you again, every time." Our future stretched uncertain before us. This relationship built on violence and protection, and feelings that had grown from trauma into something neither of us quite understood yet. But it was ours, chosen deliberately, not stumbled into by accident. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build something new. Not just survival, not just empire maintenance. Something worth the blood it cost to protect." His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. "You're no longer invisible, Generosa. You're the woman who changed a crime lord, who made him remember he was human underneath all the rest." "And you're no longer just surviving," I said, understanding dawning. "You're building something worth protecting." Below us, the city lights began to flicker on, thousands of them, spreading across Naples like stars. The criminal underworld down there had adjusted to new rules. Everyone knew now, Generosa Udinese was untouchable, the woman for whom Esposito had gone to war, the housemaid who'd stopped being invisible and become essential instead. "By sunrise," I said softly. They all understood. "And they'll never forget." Giordano pulled me closer, careful still of my healing body. "Neither will I. The moment I saw your blood on my floors, everything changed. You changed it." The sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of purple and pink across darkening sky. Beautiful evening, perfect October weather. And sitting there on the terrace of a villa I'd once only cleaned, held by a man whose capacity for violence was matched only by his capacity for protection, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my mother died. I felt like I belonged. "For 9 months I was invisible," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "A ghost moving through your world, present but unnoticed. Now I'm the reason the entire city holds its breath. The woman who changed everything just by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time." "The right place," Giordano corrected gently. "The right time. You were exactly where you needed to be for me to finally see you, to finally see myself." "And somehow, impossibly," I continued, "I'm learning to live with that power. The power of being seen, of mattering, of being worth 12 bodies and a dismantled empire." "You were always worth it," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." We sat together as darkness fell completely, the city below transforming into a sea of lights. Somewhere down there, men went about their business with new caution, new respect, new fear. The Esposito name carried different weight now, not just power and violence, but unpredictability. The willingness to go to war over someone who supposedly didn't matter. That unpredictability was our protection now, our shield. The reason I could walk through Naples without fear, could visit my father in Bari without looking over my shoulder, could dream again about literature and teaching and futures that seemed impossible just weeks ago. I'd been invisible for 9 months, a ghost in Giordano's world, moving through rooms like air. Now I was the woman who'd changed everything. The housemaid who'd stopped a crime lord mid-step and made him remember what it meant to be human, to care, to protect not from strategy, but from something deeper and more dangerous. Love built on violence, protection born from blood, a future carved from the aftermath of war. It shouldn't have worked. By every logical measure, this was doomed. The power imbalance, the trauma bonding, the bodies buried in our foundation. But sitting there in Giordano's arms, watching Naples breathe below us, I understood something fundamental. Logic had nothing to do with it. This was about choice. About two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and decided that what they'd built was worth keeping, despite the cost. "Ready to face tomorrow?" Giordano asked as stars emerged overhead. I thought about my new title, my new salary, my new life where I sat at tables making decisions instead of cleaning them. Thought about Papa's tears of relief and Katerina's quiet support, and Lucia asking if the scary men were really gone forever. Thought about being seen, really truly seen for the first time in my life. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." The city held its breath below us. And for once, I held mine with it. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The story of how I stopped being invisible had just begun.